44 BC, the vast Roman Empire stretched around the entire Mediterranean. Julius Caesar, proclaimed dictator in perpetuity, assumed full powers and governed like a king. The new regime was despised by the majority of senators who remained faithful to the Republic. Cassius and Brutus, leaders of the discontented, prepared to riposte. On the Ides of March the 15th, Caesar's right-hand man, Mark Antony, accompanied the dictator to a meeting at the Senate. In an attempt to save the threatened republic, Brutus and Cassius assassinated Caesar. Antony, the second most powerful man in the empire, had good reason to fear for his life. Meanwhile, Rome was plunged into panic, the city divided between Republicans and supporters of Caesar. According to the plebes, a god had been murdered and Rome was doomed. People feared a bloodbath. Cleopatra, renowned mistress of Caesar and pregnant with his son, discovered the terrible news and, like Antony, saw her world crumble. A few hours after the assassination, Antony learned that Caesar's murderers had foreseen no replacement system of governance. The senators' plans stopped at killing the tyrant. Rome's seat of power was vacant, an opportunity Antony had to seize. The city slept beneath a blanket of fear, of civil war. Antony managed to call a meeting at a very agitated Senate. Tension was palpable between the assassins and supporters of Caesar.
Seditiones populus Romanus facturus est. Murmurat enim minaque iactat multitudo. Que etiam vos atque domos vestras, cognatosque familiasque pugnare potest. Equidem nullum aliud consilium nisi mali vestri impediendit ineo. Caveto vero plebem dolentem, que subito patrem perdiderit, atquad arma capienda paratissima essit. Ile cie tanta beneficia dederat iam oxissus est. Et ciam vobis aut perfugium querre, aut morte timere necesse est. Vobis rustice ville sunt, in quasiam vos guerre utile sint. Ego te brutte bene novi, nec dubitoque pro virtute in qua tibi nihil sit optatius libertatem. Ita egeris und hang vindicare, nec vab illo abhorrere volueris. Itaque sentio senatu consultum fiat, ut et omnibus coniurationis principibus venia atque impunitas detur. Et omnia acta Caesaris rata sint. Tu quidem qui acta Caesara abrogantur sentis, num quesistis quis ad magistratum tibi mandasset. Cuius ex auctoritate hunc honorem recepsisses. Cuius ex munere magnificam domum inquatanta convivia libenter apparares. Equidem aperte loc for animum vestro appello, nisi omnia acta Caesaris rata erunt, omnes pleraque et magistratus perdemus. Quanam auctoritate sit ita sit, de republica, de civitate, de populo Romano statuatis. Crebriores in dies conveniunt Caesari veterani, acquibus terras republice redendas esse. Cum abrogata iam sit ilius acta qui has dona verit, quis autem vestrum pallam is dicere audeat.
Antoine revient de loin. Il est certain qu'il aurait pu périr après la mort de César, c'est même ce qu'il craignait. Il perçoit la mort de César comme une catastrophe pour lui, parce que il doit toute sa carrière à César et il est certain que, dans son esprit, que César mort, eh bien sa carrière va s'arrêter. Les chefs de la conjuration, tout le monde les connaît, c'est Brutus et Cassius.
Bruto, purtroppo per lui, non è un soldato, è un filosofo, è un grande senatore, è un uomo d'onore, direbbe Shakespeare.
L'un était véritablement un tueur, avec la bande à Cassius, comme on disait dès l'Antiquité, et l'autre était le symbole de la vertu républicaine.
Antony had avoided a civil war, making him, in the eyes of many, the man who re-established public peace. Filled with great confidence, he demanded the reading of Caesar's will.
Amici, implica legere.
Antony had lived and fought alongside Caesar. He was a military genius who Caesar had left to govern Italy in his absence. He therefore had good reason to hope to be strongly favored in Caesar's will.
Gaius Julius Caesar, sororis suae nepotem Gaium Octavium, heredem suum ex dodrante instituit. Praeterea, in imacera, Gaium Octavium etiam in familiam nomenque adoptat. Populo autem Romano, hortos suos circa Tiberim sitos publice legat.
Antoine a sans doute été déçu. Le contenu du testament était loin d'être à la hauteur de ses espoirs. César marque nettement sa préférence pour Octave, son petit-neveu, qui est tout juste âgé de 18 ans, et il s'est pris d'affection pour lui 6 mois plus tôt, apparemment, en le couchant en quelque sorte sur son testament.
Cette adoption totalement secrète laisse penser que César envisageait de modifier ce testament, écrit en septembre 45. Il pouvait encore avoir un fils de sa chair, ou même vouloir d'un autre héritier. Quelles que furent ses intentions, il n'eut pas le temps de rédiger un Nouveau Testament, ne pensant pas être assassiné.
C'est un testament privé. On ne peut pas parler d'héritage politique dans la mesure où Rome est encore une république et donc César n'est pas un roi susceptible de pouvoir léguer un royaume à des héritiers.
Caesar's funeral would serve as the ideal occasion for Antony to convince Rome that he was the rightful guardian of Caesar's heritage.
Oci Caesar privatus mortuus esset. Magnis orationibus non mihi opus esset. Sed quoniam et ille in summo imperio perit, et ego etiam consulantum gero. Nullas rescredicentes sunt tacere debeo. Certer pater ille, canvis pontifex maximus, sacrosanctus, vir magnus, divus, tamen ab amicis, a civibus oxissus est, quam nullus hostis interficere potuerat. Quid opus fuit telenitate tua, o Caesar? Quid sacrosanctitate? Quid legibus? De crudelissime ab amicis oxissum esse. O dolorem, o cruorem accanno capillo stilantem. Ceratam togam, quam nulla ratione vestivisse videris, nisi ut in ea ferum reciperes. Per Iovem, Rome custodem, per celestes Deos, iuro, iusurandum do, me Caesaris mortem persecuturum esse.
At the end of his speech, Antony approached the improvised funeral pyre. Swept up in a fervor, the crowd set fire to the pyre and threw on arms, clothes, and jewelry, setting the premises of Caesar worship.
Alors au moment des funérailles de César, il va jouer un jeu extrêmement ambigu et très habile. Il n'appelle pas à la vengeance, mais ça revient exactement au même parce qu'il provoque la colère du peuple qui est furieux de l'ingratitude des meurtriers de César.
Faced with the vindictiveness of the people, Brutus and Cassius were forced to flee Rome, leaving the path clear for Antony. But they weren't the only ones to depart. Someone else had already gone before them. Cleopatra returned to Egypt.
Cléopâtre, reine d'Égypte, a bien des raisons de quitter Rome. Lors de l'assassinat de Jules César, elle a à la fois perdu son amant et le protecteur de son royaume.
The Kingdom of Egypt was the most important country in the East, the granary of the Mediterranean. Alexandria was rivaled by Rome alone and was proud of its port, the biggest in the world. Cleopatra was free-thinking and intelligent. She knew she was under threat.
Elle a au moins 3 défauts aux yeux des Romains. C'est une femme, et ils sont misogynes. C'est une reine, et la monarchie est très mal vue à Rome. Et puis c'est une étrangère, et ils sont un peu xénophobes, surtout avec les Orientaux. La peur de représailles à son encontre, mêlée au souci de protéger la vie de son fils et la préservation de son royaume, étaient autant de motifs qui la poussaient à partir. Cléopâtre a alors 25 ans.
At the same time, Caesar's heir arrived in Rome.
Ecce Caius Julius Caesar Octavianus.
Octave et Antoine ne s'apprécient pas du tout. Ou plus exactement, ils ont des rapports qui sont d'emblée très froids.
Lors de sa première rencontre avec Antoine, Octave adopte une attitude modeste. Il a 20 ans de moins qu'Antoine et ce dernier le traite avec condescendance, le désigne comme celui qui doit tout à un nom. Il l'appelle aussi le petit jeune homme.
Octavian was ambitious. He launched propaganda against Antony, flattered senators, bought off veterans, and sapped the morale of the legions. He handed out donations financed by his father's inheritance to form his own party and army, asserting his qualities as an adopted son. Octavian was just 19 years old. For a year and a half, Brutus and Cassius, still wary of Rome, rallied their legions in the east. Brutus took control in Greece and Macedonia, Cassius in Syria. They hired all the old soldiers they met, raised heavy tributes, and established a domain which would enable them to see off their enemies in case of conflict.
Urgenti fidas legiones habemus. Neque tributis scolati et pecunia.
Disgratias agamus, qui tantas terribilesque copias. Pro iure ac republica nobis dederit.
Faced with a growing Republican threat, Antony joined forces with Octavian despite their marked differences. They formed a triumvirate with Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, Caesar's main lieutenant. This, the so-called Second Triumvirate, was a legally established authority, with power to be shared between the three men for a period of 5 years. Avenging Caesar was the surest way of maintaining this power.
Avant d'accomplir cette mission, Antoine et Octavien s'occupent des ennemis de l'intérieur, en quelque sorte, et font exécuter leurs opposants. C'est ce qu'on appelle la proscription, sous forme d'affiches portant les noms des condamnés à mort, qui sèment la terreur parmi les sénateurs et les chevaliers.
Many of the proscribed were stripped of their assets, and new taxes were levied, which provided the money needed to confront the Republicans. Panic swept through the aristocracy, causing many of them to flee Rome. The alliance between Antony and Octavian unleashed a reign of terror. From then on, they would be known as the Caesarians. They went in search of Brutus and Cassius across the Adriatic from Brindisium to Dyrrachium, then onwards to the plain west of Philippi in Greece. Antony and his legions were first to seek out the Republicans, quick marching his men over 500 kilometers in 10 days, to the great surprise of their enemies. Treated as brothers in arms, his troops pushed on, surpassing their limits. Antony, Rome's greatest warrior, was therefore ready to cross swords with the powerful legions of Caesar's assassins and to deliver a merciless battle on the plain of Philippi. Urged on by their leader, a model of high esteem and worthiness, Antony's legions eagerly embraced the cause, in spite of facing fellow Romans. Brutus and Cassius took up position on high ground close to the town of Philippi. Brutus's camp was protected by dense forest and steep embankments, while that of Cassius was bordered by a seemingly impassable marsh. Antony set up camp 2 kilometers away, making do with the desolation of the plain. The 2 Republican camps sat either side of the Via Egnata, the only road that crossed the Eastern Roman Empire. From one camp to the other, Brutus and Cassius blocked the road with a rampart and ditch. About 10 kilometers away was the port of Neapolis, facilitating communications and refitting. The well-supplied and well-protected Republicans would be capable of waging a drawn-out war. while the Caesarians had no water and no nearby towns. Antony asked Cleopatra for help. She was to send 100 ships to Neapolis with reinforcements. Antony could then establish access to the sea, which was indispensable for resupplying his troops. Cassius built a huge palisade ahead of his camp to protect his forces. He believed the natural lie of the marshland offered further protection to the south. Antony knew he had to breach Cassius' palisade. In under 10 days, he secretly built a causeway across the supposedly impassable marshes, which would enable him to go round the palisade and attack Cassius on several fronts.
Le plus dangereux des deux adversaires entre Brutus et Cassius, c'est évidemment Cassius. Cassius a une expérience militaire incontestable que n'a pas Brutus. Brutus n'a pas d'expérience militaire. Cassius, c'est un vieux routier de l'armée et c'est la raison pour laquelle Antoine décide de s'attaquer en priorité à lui.
But Antony wasn't alone. He had been joined by the young Octavian and his legions. His mission was to lead a charge on Brutus's camp. If only he hadn't felt so weak. Octavian had arrived on a stretcher 2 days earlier. Antony gave out battle orders. Octavian was to attack Brutus. But Octavian showed no signs of recovering from the illness he was stricken with since leaving Rome. His physician reminded him of a nightmare he'd had, a bad omen. If he went into combat, the outcome would be fatal.
Quindi è una guerra terribile, crudele, condotta da due eserciti che tra l'altro combattono nella stessa maniera. Sono leggermente diverse le componenti all'interno, ma sono cittadini romani gli uni e gli altri. Le forze che si fronteggiano sotto Philippi sono forze enormi. Sono 19 legioni con intorno ai 17.000 cavalieri, le forze di Antonio e Ottaviano. Sono 17 legioni con un numero maggiore di cavalieri, circa 20.000 cavalieri, le forze di Bruto e Cassio. Sono circa equilibrate, circa 100.000 uomini per parte.
Antony managed to breach the palisade and could engage the enemy in hand-to-hand combat.
Utina maetatem peragamus, si vero adversar pugnae voniet. Utrum fugere ad mori maletis, equideam victoriam ostium non time.
At the same time, Brutus attacked the Caesarian camp. Octavian was nowhere to be seen. Given the little resistance offered, Brutus easily took the camp.
Milites Romani propagatur, ut Caesaris caedem, persequamur!
Antony decided to split his cavalry into two groups. The first was to cut off his enemy's infantry, while the second, led by Antony, led a charge on Cassius's camp.
Tantum oratus sum, ut amoris cosa, ut diligentissimum amicum, uderem ab ostibus captum. Cur recusas, ne decorrerem estaloas!
Antony won an astounding victory, fulfilling all his aims. Draw Cassius into combat, breach the palisade, and capture the camp. Brutus too was victorious. He had taken the Caesarian camp. But Cassius had been mistaken. Worse, he had believed Brutus captured.
Cassius a mal apprécié la situation, probablement en raison de l'opacité des fumées du combat. Il perd la vie stupidement à 45 ans, le jour de son anniversaire.
Il était réputé pour son autorité, sa sévérité. Il avait toute l'estime de ses troupes qu'il commandait avec une extrême discipline. C'était le meilleur général des armées républicaines. Le suicide de Cassius va coûter cher à Brutus.
12 kilometers away at Neapolis, a sea battle was taking place at the same time as that on land. Antony and Octavian's fleet were suffering a shattering defeat. Brutus and Cassius's fleet closed off the sea to Antony for good, thus dispelling any hope of supplies and reinforcements. If the ships promised by Cleopatra had arrived, the outcome may possibly have been different. Cleopatra herself had in fact sailed from Alexandria at the head of a huge armada to bring help to Antony and Octavian.
Nihume. Διατάζω το στόλο να οπισθοχωρήσει. Γυρνάμε στην Αλεξάνδρεια.
Would this about turn, imposed by the tempestuousness of the Mediterranean, be understood by the Caesarians?
Cléopâtre est suspectée d'avoir eu une conduite équivoque, puisque ses renforts ne sont jamais arrivés aux Césariens. La tempête, survenue à point nommé, l'empêche d'être directement impliquée dans la lutte opposant Césariens et républicains. Pour l'instant, Cléopâtre ignore la victoire en demi-teinte des Césariens. Antoine a battu Cassius, Brutus a battu Octavien, un partout. Mais elle sait que si les républicains sont battus, elle n'est pas pour autant à l'abri de tout danger. Peut-elle compter sur la clémence des héritiers de César? À Rome, elle a connu Antoine, mais ignore tout d'Octavien. Accueillera-t-il avec bienveillance Césarion ou le verra-t-il comme un concurrent potentiel et un rival? Elle doit attendre la fin de la lutte armée pour le savoir.
لمربط وكجنوي نماليس كلاتيبياست
Melius.
In aeterna gloria sit Caesar. Unus verus!
Vivat Marcus Antonius! Vivat Marcus Antonius! Vivat Marcus Antonius! Vivat Marcus!
This great military feat established Antony as the true heir of Caesar.
Ultimus Romanorum fuit Cassius. Quo neminem fortiorem urs unquam gignere poterit. Quem tassi clamum mondum curate. Ne funeribus magnis animi militum quaederint.
Casi milites te brute clamacusant. Se cladem pudere itaque. Iusa tua efficere minime cupiunt, que cum hostes victores oderint. Rupsus pugnare cupiunt.
Nostris hoc dicide. Clarissima victoria odie pugnatum esse, quae paene plena fuiset. Nissi nostri, cum hostes profligare possent. Octaviani castra festinanter diripere valuiset. Qui tamen hostes, sumis in angustiis, audiu resistere poterunt. Quo igitur patientius perseverabimus, eo maiore ri victoria.
Bruto ha ragione a raccomandare la pazienza ai suoi uomini. Se procedesse come vorrebbe a logorare l'esercito avversario, contando anche sull'appoggio della flotta che ha, potrebbe ancora vincere la battaglia, potrebbe ancora vincere la guerra oltre che la battaglia.
To worsen the situation, every day Antony's legions took up position at sword's length to defy Brutus's troops with insults and provocations. Brutus felt alone and deprived of Cassius. And yet, confident of his position, he delayed the final battle, which the Caesarians continuously provoked.
Brutus a bien analysé la situation. Il voit bien que le camp césarien est en proie, d'une part, à la disette, d'autre part, aux rigueurs d'un automne exceptionnellement rigoureux. Et tout cela fait qu'il sait qu'il commence à les avoir à sa merci.
On Antony and Octavian's camp, the situation had turned critical. Famine claimed victim after victim. Morale was at a low, stomachs knotted. The troops had had enough of tramping through mud, and in the morning, they frequently had to break off the thin layer of ice that had formed on their fingers during the freezing night. Since losing access to the sea, supplies were few and far between. In Brutus's camp, resources were inexhaustible. But although the situation appeared comfortable, his soldiers, desperate for revenge, were gradually drained by the constant waiting. To pacify them, Brutus fed them well, paid them double, and even offered armor in solid silver to his officers.
L'autorità di Bruto nel campo sembra essere veramente al limite minimo, cioè Bruto non riesce a controllare le sue truppe. Il 23 ottobre accetta la battaglia decisiva. Il malcontento all'interno del campo fra le truppe potrebbe produrre un aumento, una crescita delle diserzioni. L'esercito dei triumviri è in condizioni peggiori del suo da certi punti di vista. Nella realtà ha paura che venga scambiata per viltà la sua decisione di non combattere e alla fine segue la volontà dell'esercito e accetta la battaglia campale.
Sicut Pompeius Magnus, non imperator, sed imperatus, bellum, listurus esse videor. Quoniam ita est, in proelium rodeamus, signum Apollonis do, quod utinam nos tegat.
Brutus, ad pugnam venit.
Vive Marcus Antonius! Vive Marcus Antonius! Vive Marcus Antonius! Consistere! Laxare!
For 3 weeks, the Caesarian legions stood in formation. For 3 weeks, the Republicans refused battle. But finally, they decided to accept.
Again! 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 Again!
The eagle from Antony's camp was the victor. Antony urged his troops into battle in customary fashion. According to the historian Actium, he said, "Soldiers of Rome, the enemy is before us, those whom we have tried to draw out from behind their fortifications. Let none of you prefer untreatable and murderous hunger to enemy ramparts and bodies attainable through courage, the sword, and despair. Our situation is so bad that nothing can be postponed until tomorrow. It is today that will be decided either complete victory or death with honor." Thus, Philippi became a battlefield of ideas. On one side, Brutus and Cassius fighting for freedom and the Republic. And on the other, Antony and Octavian to uphold the work of Caesar and the might of Rome. A struggle between republicanism and monarchism. One of Brutus's top officers from Gaul surrendered to the enemy, forcing him to accept battle.
Pugna mos copivistis, at pugna me coegistis. Cum manio more vincere possim. Quae spes, et mea, et vestra, vobis non dicenda est. Cum superiora, lobis noca sunt, tutaque terga. Tu in iniquo loco hostis, qui inter nos et famen intersit.
Legio expedita. In Abina. Venus. Adios. Segnare. Tergare.
With the experience of many military campaigns behind him, Antony had a plan. Firstly, he would stretch out his right wing, forcing his adversary to do the same, and thus weakening the center of his battle formation. Secondly, Antony would take advantage of the gap to send his cavalry in to attack Brutus's center. Finally, all that would remain to be done was to surround Brutus's infantry with a pincer movement that would prove fatal to the enemy. Brutus made reasonable headway into the Caesarian ranks, but his weakened center would not hold out much longer. It was time to remind his legionaries of the righteousness of their cause, the defense of the Republic.
Aut victoria mea, Romanis libertatem reddet, aut mors, mi servitute liberavit, cetera tuta securaque sunt nisi hoc. Utrum nos in libertate vituri, ad moriturissimus.
As the plain reddened with spilled blood, the hope of victory increased tenfold the strength and fervor of the Caesarian troops. The close combat was of an extreme violence, each man fighting toe-to-toe with the same weapons. Appian tells us, one side fought for survival rather than victory. The other, for victory, and to please a general who had forced them to fight against his will. The carnage and the howls of the dying were atrocious. Antony dispersed the Republicans, preventing them from regrouping. Brutus's troops capitulated under Antony's pressure.
Miserere nobis Caesar! Poignam petimus! Non ne Romani sumus? Fili juventutem inspice.
Quare egos tibus supplicibus conquerere debeam. Aliquid tamen opportunum efficere possum. Tortibus consulemus, uter integer sit. Diripite milites, ut promissum quam praedam meriti estis.
At the end of the second battle, Brutus just managed to flee into the hills, the result of being unable to impose himself on his legionaries. Antony's brilliant military strategy had brought about success. By striking at Cassius, he unmasked the weaknesses of Brutus, deprived of his precious allies' counsel. "30,000 men died in this civil war, the bloodiest in all antiquity. Armed with the same weapons, speaking the same language, they fought against countrymen, friends, and even brothers. In despair, Brutus took his own life, preferring death as a free man to the ignobility of capture. According to Plutarch, his dying words were, "O wretched virtue, thou wert but a name, and yet I worshipped thee as real indeed, but now it seems thou wert but fortune's slave." With Brutus, the last flames of the Senators' Republic died out. His body was carried before the true architect of the victory.
Curam magna funera edifiant. Cineres matridentur.
Quam anubis est, caput prae cidite, pramam aspartate, quod victore nostrae testimonius sit.
Antony and Octavian had too many other concerns to allow themselves to bask in glory. Caesar was finally avenged and their own power consolidated. The destiny of Rome had swept aside the Senators' Republic, weary after 5 centuries of existence. But peace had finally been restored. The people of Rome applauded this peace they had longed for. Crowned with glory, Octavian and Antony reaffirmed their power and divided the influential zones of the empire between them. The more unassuming Octavian took the west, while Antony, the true architect of victory, the east, the richest part of the empire, the capital of which was Alexandria. Cleopatra had no doubt that she would be taken to task by Antony over her absence from Philippi. Once again, she would worry about her son and her kingdom. Antony was well aware that Alexandria meant control over trade in the east and a crucial strategic base for any plans for expansion. Dominion over Egypt was a major concern for the Romans. Antony and Octavian had become the masters of the Mediterranean. The Roman Empire now had two heads. Would peace remain one of their ambitions?